Hey everybody, welcome into the back room. I'm Andy Ostroy, and I am very excited for today's show. So much fun stuff to talk about. We're going to get to all of it soon, and we're going to talk about some of it with our guest, Michael Steele. So we'll bring him out shortly. But first, I want to thank you for tuning in. We appreciate you listening, and we'd love to hear your comments. So email us at backroomandy@gmail.com and or post on our social media, and we'll read a few comments and some feedback next time. And if you like the podcast, please follow or subscribe, and you'll be notified every time we post a new episode. All right, we're going to have three big things for you today, and we're going to start you off with this.
Congress, if you will, please investigate the political witch hunts against me currently being brought by the corrupt DOJ and FBI, who are totally out of control. They don't go after Biden with all of his corruption, the most corrupt president in history. But they keep coming after me from the day I came down the escalator, all failures.
God, that reminds me of something. I can't quite put my finger on. Oh, yeah. Russia, if you're listening. He's literally doing the same thing. Congress, rescue me.
Well, he's not running for president. He's running to stay out of prison.
Can he actually run? The notion of Trump running anywhere for anything, physically running, is pretty comical. But all right, Donald Trump, if you're listening. Guys, what do you think the odds of Donald Trump listening to this podcast are?
0.0001%.
So you're saying there's a chance.
Correct.
Okay. Donald Trump, if you're listening, there's a reason why they're not going after Joe Biden. Because he's not a criminal. And you are. In multiple instances, in multiple jurisdictions. You are an unrepentant criminal. And that's it, period. And how many MAGAs are listening to the show now? What are we up to?
I think we're down to 5.
Oh, down to 5.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So the 5 MAGAs listening, take the red MAGA cap off, put the Kool-Aid down, just take a deep breath and listen to me. There's no witch hunt. None. There's no conspiracy. It's not the deep state. It's not because he's running for president. It's not because he's a victim and everybody's against him. It's simply because he's a fucking criminal. Period. End of story.
Witch hunt. That's the response. That's what they're hearing out of your mouth. All they're hearing is like
it's blah, 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 blah.
Witch hunt.
Like goes through a film, like a Google translator. There's like a Trump translator.
That's so good. That's so true.
He committed a crime. Witch hunt.
Yes, that's what they're hearing. I mean, you know it.
Yeah, we keep saying this all the time, but it literally is a cult. It is an absolute cult. To think that there is someone on this planet who the entire world is conspiring against, and that he's actually not only innocent, he's the greatest president that ever lived.
But he really is. But he's impressive. The fact that he's been able to do this for so long is incredibly
He's an evil
impressive.
genius.
Absolutely.
So Donald Trump was hit last night with 3 new charges in the Mar-a-Lago stolen, classified, top secret, military war planning document thing. It's called a superseding indictment. So it's taken the original indictment that came out of Florida in the Department of Justice through Special Counsel Jack Smith, and it added 3 more charges. There were 2 new counts of obstruction and then a new count under the Espionage Act related to him actually showing the Iraq war plan document to those people at Bedminster. And for some context, let's play something that's been around for a few weeks now.
Well, with Milley, let me see that. I'll show you an example. He said that I wanted to attack Iran. Isn't it amazing? I have a big pile of papers. This thing just came up. Look. This was him. They presented me this. This is off the record, but they presented me this. This was him. This was the Defense Department and him. Wow. We looked at some. This was him. This wasn't done by me. This was him. All sorts of stuff. It's pages long. Look. Wait a minute. Let's see here. Wait a minute.
Yeah.
I just found, isn't that amazing? This totally wins my case, you know. Mm-hmm. Except it is like highly confidential. Yeah. By the way, isn't that incredible?
Yeah.
I was just saying, because we were talking about it. And he said he wanted to attack Iran and what?
He
These are the
you did.
papers.
It's pretty.
Wow. This was done by the military, given to me. I think we can probably, right?
I don't know. We'll have to see. Yeah, we'll have to try to
Declassify.
figure out a
See, as president, I could have declassified
Yeah.
it. Now I can't, but this is classified.
now we have a problem.
First of all, the people in the room, they were there writing a book about Mark Meadows. What is so fucking funny? They're laughing at the former president talking about top secret documents, war plans, as if it's like Sports Illustrated. And they're giggling and cackling. It's literally disgusting. But the interesting thing is there's now like a new player in this, Carlos de Oliveira, another poor schmuck who's gotten dragged into Trump's web of criminality. He's like a low-level property manager. He also was a valet parker at Mar-a-Lago. And then Walt Nauta, who we already know, was indicted for helping Trump move and hide documents. This guy, de Oliveira, he apparently took Mar-a-Lago's IT expert, Yusel Tavares, into the audio closet. And this is where, like, reality turns into Goodfellas. It is just the funniest fucking shit ever, because if you listen to these clips, it's like you're watching a mob movie. Like the boss wants the server deleted, the boss. And then it's like, can we trust this guy, de Oliveira? Can we trust him? Is he good? Can we trust him?
Well, the only qualification that Trump looks for is not whether they're qualified to do their job, but if he believes they have incredible loyalty to Trump. So that's why the car parking attendant is now running the entire infrastructure of Mar-a-Lago. But I think what's really funny about this story is here he is asking his employee to erase the server, which contains all of the camera data. And this is a man who accused Hillary Clinton of bleaching her server for 3 years. We heard how Hillary bleached the server. And this gets back always with Trump. It's all about projection because the accusation is always really a confession.
That's right. As a pathological liar, you can understand what the truth is by just listening to the opposite of what Trump says. And so it's all about projection. Freud, if he was around today, would be like, this guy's good. He's good.
It's all he ever does. It's so consistent that it's incredible.
Yeah. Prosecutors love clips. They love when there's a defendant who's on tape, on camera, essentially admitting the crimes. And so now the question becomes, like, are these guys going to flip? And the answer is yes, they're all going to flip. Somebody, Mrs. de Oliveira is going to be like, honey, you're not going to jail for that pig.
100%.
And so this is why, like, months and months and months ago, liberals are like, when is this going to, like, this web is so large and it has to be unwoven and dissected in a prosecution so that when it's taken to a jury, all the players, all the pieces, all the clips, all the evidence, it just makes it beyond a reasonable doubt. We as armchair prosecutors can sit home and go, it's been 2 years, it's been this, why? I'm frustrated, why isn't he in prison, blah, blah, blah. And I get all that, and I'm in that camp. But I also am in the camp of, this shit's not easy. You're talking about potentially putting a former U.S. president in prison, and it's got to be done right. And I don't think there's a soul on this planet, Republican or Democrat, who can say Jack Smith doesn't know what he's doing. That dude ain't fucking around. The other thing about all of this is that it continues to just destroy all of Donald Trump's defenses. I didn't know. I didn't take it. They were planted. They weren't classified. I had no intent. It's all there. It's all there. We're still waiting for the indictment. It's like you need a scoreboard with this guy. Like, wait, was this the indictment we're in? No, that's another indictment. That's the January 6th, the insurrection, people dying at the Capitol because of Trump. No, this was Florida. Like, it is unbelievable the amount of shit this guy is in. Crazy. All right, let's move on. Twitter. Matty, I know you love talking about Twitter. This is Matty's day. We're talking about Twitter. And then after Twitter, we're going to be talking about Barbie, the movie. Matty, this is the best day. Matty's going to be hashtagging best day ever on all his social media today.
Two of my favorite topics. Well, Twitter, we have Elon Musk, who clearly, as we know, there's no rails to contain this person because he's taken one of the most iconic brands in social media or iconic brands in the world and change the name of it to something that doesn't make any sense. And the logo we used is just the letter X from a font. It's like if you said, oh, Times New Roman X is now my logo for an international brand. And it's incredible that you could destroy a brand so immensely as to ruin it in every way. He's fully destroyed it.
It's a totally distinct, well-known, incredible, visually appealing brand. And what he did was he turned it into something that's generic, nondescript, undistinctive, unexceptional, controversial. And the reason why it's controversial is, let's take a look at the letter X, if you will. The letter X symbolizes porn. Okay? X-rated.
Oh.
Okay? Jen, I'm so surprised you. As someone who devours porn 24/7, you should know that.
I'm glad you're piecing these things together for me.
Okay. The letter X evokes fascist and Nazi symbols. The letter X is dark and male. The letter X is to cross something out. It's a negative. X is when you get answers wrong on a test. X. X is what people write when they can't spell their name, right? X, unlike Twitter and the blue bird, is everywhere. Twitter, the blue bird, is not. X has zero brand equity. It literally has trashed tens of millions of dollars in brand equity. Free advertising. Journalists, musicians, actors, every time they do something, write something, there's a little symbol next to it. Every article, every magazine, every newspaper, every website, gone. So now instead of tweeting, what are we going to do? We're going to X? Xting? That sounds an awful lot like sexting, Jen.
Mm.
And no one ever is going to refer to Twitter as X. No one is ever going to stop saying tweet. No one's going to say, hey, I X'd. I re-X'd. Forget it. Okay. All right. Enough about Elon Musk and Twitter. Barbie. Last night I took myself to see Barbie because I'm a Barbie girl in a Barbie world. It's fantastic. All right, so I'm going to go last.
Come on.
No,
I'm dying.
no,
We've been waiting and waiting for your assessment. Come on, man.
There's enough of me talking. All right, Matty, I know you're busting at the seams.
I mean, Greta Gerwig, of course, is a genius, and it's provable by everything that you see in Barbie. She proved that you could make a movie that was watchable by any level. You could go in there without any expectations of being deeply moved or being told that there's toxic masculinity or any of the other things that this movie does, and you could enjoy that movie. You could be a 14-year-old and not recognize any of the references to the 30 movies that are referenced in there and enjoy that movie. But at the same time, it was this incredibly deep movie which showed exactly why Ben Shapiro hated it, which was that you had Barbie, this plastic doll, who really came to the realization that she wanted to be human and wanted to be a woman. And that's not Ben Shapiro or the GOP's message. They want to control, and this is the opposite of what Barbie shows.
So I saw Oppenheimer and then Barbie, and Matt said I was going to cry. And I was so mad when he said that because I don't cry during movies. And God damn it, the tears were flowing. She reached in, she took out my soul, and she articulated how I feel. I don't know about most women, but I'm thinking there's like a good percentage there who just went, I'm just ordinary. I'm never going to be extraordinary like these Barbies. There were no Ashkenazi 5-foot Jewish Barbies who are going to grow into their prominent nose. And I still felt like a little girl who was playing with Barbies when I was watching the movie. But then I also was laughing my ass off because to have men mansplain me about The Godfather, dude, that's my whole life. It was such a
careful of spoilers. We don't want to get in trouble with the people who haven't seen the film yet.
If you haven't seen it, it's a perfectly beautiful, written, directed, and visually appealing movie. Well done, Greta Gerwig.
Well, I hated it. I had to say that. But I also want to say, as a woman, okay. All right, all kidding aside, a couple of things that are unrelated to the film itself. I had no sleep the night before, so when those lights went down, I fell asleep.
Oh no.
I fell asleep for like, I literally had to, for like 10 minutes, battle sleep. Fortunately for me, the guy sitting next to me kept clearing his throat every 39 seconds throughout the whole fucking movie. So that kept me awake. But I don't know if you've ever been in a movie where the person sitting next to you is just like, every 39 seconds. I literally was like, all right, what do I do? Do I move? Do I get up and move? Can't do that. There's no seats. This guy got COVID. Like, I was just like, fuck, can't I go to a fucking movie and just enjoy myself? Jesus Christ.
After
His
being
wife was on
bullied.
the cell phone. The kid was like, Mommy, I have that dolly. I was like, oh, God, I'm sitting with the family from hell. Okay. It was a great movie. It was a great movie because I went home and castrated myself, basically. I was ashamed to be a man. God. I mean, I saw myself up on the screen like in my worst human form. I was like, God, do we do that? Do we do that? Now, look, I've got 3 daughters, and I try very hard, and I love women. I love females. I run a foundation that gives grants to women filmmakers. I'm as liberal as you can get. But, you know, we all are who we are. And at some point, we're all guilty of some stupid shit. Explaining The Godfather or something. That was genius, by the way. Sorry for the people who didn't see the movie yet. You won't, don't worry, it didn't ruin anything for you. What she did was so brilliantly define men and what's wrong with them and the patriarchy and our cluelessness and our insensitivity. And there are just so many amazing moments. Brilliant, funny, indicting. And you're just like, wow. And the acting. I mean, Ryan Gosling is off the charts awesome. Margot Robbie is literally a Barbie. I mean, she is a Barbie. It was just a great movie, an important film. And I totally, with a capital T, understand why this movie is giving Republicans, and in particular, Republican men, explosive diarrhea. Because it is every fucking thing they hate, they fear, they're terrified of. What? Women with opinions? Women with jobs? Women with a voice? Equality? What? And it is so predictable to watch all of them come out and attack this movie. Ted Cruz, like, simple question. What are they angry at? What do they have against this movie? It's teaching little girls how to be strong and successful
and self-aware.
And self-aware and assertive. So that's it. Barbie, go see it. It's amazing. All right. Winners and losers.
My winner is Greta Gerwig. Barbie earned the most amount of any movie this year, and it's directed by a woman, so that's fantastic. My loser, abusive men. Robert A. Hayden, a gynecologist, was convicted of luring women across state lines to appointments in Manhattan where he abused them. Boo.
My winner is the Georgia election workers Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss, who sued Giuliani into admitting he lied and now will almost certainly be disbarred. There's so much more to this story that's just delightful. My loser, because he just keeps losing, is DeSantis, who had to cancel a fundraiser and also lower the price of a fundraiser. And according to 538, he's now at 18.8%, while Trump is at 52%, a 33-point gap. And donors are starting to look at the exit doors because he's collapsing.
My winner, Greta Gerwig, for utterly nailing why we men are a pathetic puddle of insecurity, self-loathing, and fear. My loser, Carlos de Oliveira, for being the latest in a seemingly never-ending series of people willing to throw their lives away for a corrupt, treasonous piece of shit like Donald Trump. And that brings us to our weekly rant. It began with Donald Trump, this 8-year-long campaign to undermine and subvert America's rule of law. The climax, of course, being Trump's refusal to participate in a peaceful transition of power. Subsequently, he and fellow Republicans in and out of Congress have shown a general disregard and disdain for our criminal justice system and the U.S. Constitution. In the past week alone, we've seen Alabama defy a Supreme Court order to add a second black district to its congressional map. And we've watched Texas Governor Greg Abbott defy the Department of Justice's order to remove floating barriers in the Rio Grande that are deemed dangerous and inhumane to migrants, while disrupting U.S. Border Patrol operations in the area. Before Trump, Republicans and Democrats could put aside their policy differences and agree on matters pertaining to national security and the rule of law. And partisanship usually ended at the Constitution. But in today's toxic partisan landscape, the party that once prided itself on being the party of faith, of law and order, of national security, now only gives a shit about one thing: winning. At all costs, regardless if inhumanity, crime, and autocracy are the ultimate cost. So there's no more deference to and respect for the separation of powers, for co-equal branches of government, for Congress, for the courts, for judges, for subpoenas, for the Constitution, for the rule of law, for the belief that no one is above the law, for national security and our democracy. Republicans have reconciled that violating the law and slipping into autocracy is okay with them as long as the criminal and the autocrat is their guy. It's time for Michael Steele. He is the former Republican National Committee chairman, former lieutenant governor of Maryland, political analyst for MSNBC, and host of the Michael Steele Podcast. Michael, welcome into the back room.
Oh my gosh, in the back room. I love it. I love it. Good to be with you, Andy.
It's where all the good stuff happens.
I know, right? It's been my experience in life.
And when I was growing up, whenever I'd go shopping with my mother, she, like a lot of Jewish mothers, if she didn't find what she wanted, she would always say, "Do you have any in the back room?" Like the back room is always like where, like, no, they have the stuff, they put it out front. It's not in the back. They don't.
That's right.
So it's nice to have you in the back room here.
Good to be here, man.
Before we get into the meaty stuff of all the news that's out there, and there's certainly a lot of it, I just want to go back a little bit in time and find out what you were like as a child. Were you always kind of like a politics nerd guy? Did that interest you at a young age, or did that come later on?
No, not really. I was actually, as my family members would say, whenever I would come over to my grandparents, my aunts and uncles, they would just kind of roll their eyes and go, "Oh my God, he's here!" Because I was into everything. You know, I was the guy who would literally sit in the room and take the back off the television and just tinker inside because I wanted to figure out what the heck was going on and how did it work. And of course, by the time I was done, it no longer worked. So my aunts were really happy when I left. But the political piece was something I kind of grew into later on. In fact, as a young kid, I wanted to be a priest. So my whole orientation was geared towards becoming a Catholic priest and moving in that direction. And I guess there's a lot of politics in there, but I didn't see it so much in that vein. And it wasn't until I actually got into high school that I looked at politics and being involved in it, but not even looked at it in the sense of playing an elected role or being a party official. I just like the idea of trying to get some good things done, and moving the country and moving issues in my community in a certain direction. And all of that just kind of evolved over time.
And so do you remember the moment where just a bell went off in your head and you were like, this political thing, like this is interesting. This is something I could spend a lot of time in?
Probably once I got into law school. After I did enter a monastery after college and spent a few years following that dream or that goal. And then, once my vocation changed and I realized that, I was actually being called to do something else, so to speak. I went to law school, and when I got to law school, I kind of looked at the more proactive side of politics. Now, interestingly enough, by that time, I had developed a little bit more of an active interest but it was tough in DC. I mean, look, you want to do the school of hard knocks, then go out and try to be a Black Roman Catholic conservative Republican in Washington, D.C. in the 1980s, right? It's just like with Reagan sitting in the White House and the country go, what the hell?
Yeah, actually, I want to ask you about
so-
that in a minute, by the way.
No, but it's but by the time I got got married and moved into Prince George's County, I got involved in local politics, and I really liked the sense of kind of building something, or taking on sort of that Don Quixote kind of approach to politics. Because again, DC, you're outnumbered 10-1. I move into a county in Maryland where I'm outnumbered 15-1 in terms of voter registration. But I loved the challenge because I believed in the ideas, and I thought they offered value for people, and have spoken about in the context of how people live their everyday lives. I could convince some people that this is worth the venture.
Was your family Republican, conservative, or was that something
No,
you brought to the
no.
table? Besides
No,
trying to fuck with the television sets, like, is this another thing? They were like, Michael, back off.
That's about right. That's about right. So I had an aunt, God bless her. She recently passed, who was the only Republican in the family before I came along, and no one really talked to her much. So I figured, she must know some secrets. So I'm gonna go hang out with Aunt Josephine, and I did. I loved her. She was such a great lady. But no, my mom and dad were, and they both are, God bless, still card carrying, Roosevelt Democrats, and they're old school, and it didn't really kind of play out along the liberal conservative line the way it does now. I mean, you look at a lot of Black support for Democrats was born out of the party's elevation of civil rights. Even though the Republicans started out doing that, we abandoned that narrative in the late 50s and 60s and ceded that to Democrats, and even really lost a lot of ground going back to Roosevelt in the 30s. Because people liked his policies. They did like the policies of kind of putting a chicken in every pot during the Depression.
Mm-hmm.
So Black folks weren't immune to this idea of being on the upside and getting through these very, very difficult times. So that narrative began to move the needle, if you will. But it was the family. My mom raised me. After my dad passed away, and before she remarried, she just raised me to be an independent thinker, and she just laid it out there for me in a way that you got to own this because it's what you want, it's what you believe. It's not what somebody else wants or what somebody else believes. So that has always animated my politics. And it had a very resonating appeal because at that time, a lot of Republicans talked about, as really kind of our libertarian streak, talked about, individual liberty and the limited role that government plays in the decisions you make in your life, and what a free market looks like when it's truly free, and what decisions are like when you get to decide how to educate your kids, raise your family, where to live, et cetera. So all of those little subtext narratives appealed to me. And so when I was turned 18, I got to vote my first presidential election, 1976. I've got Gerald Ford and Jimmy Carter on the ballot. And I go to my mom and I said, I decided I registered as a Republican. She looked at me, she goes, why the hell did you do that? Well, you told me to go ahead and make up my own mind. So I went out and I learned about both parties, and she just looked at me and shook her head and walked out of the way. She's just like, okay, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I clearly have failed in my raising you. I'm like, but you raised me being an independent thinker.
Well, that's the problem.
We've had fun throughout the years with that.
Yeah, well, that's the problem with parents when they tell kids to do things, and then sometimes they actually go do them, and it's not what you really wanted. Who are your early influences, the people you looked up to and admired?
Wow, that's a great question. And the irony for for me as, a Republican was they were Democrats. I very much admired Marion Barry. I thought his connective tissue to people was the real deal. And it was. I mean, who else in the world could get caught smoking crack in a hotel with a prostitute and get elected reelected mayor 6 months after he's out of jail?
I'm
right?
glad, glad you said that, because I was going to ask you to qualify that you looked up to the pre-crack hooker Marion Barry. It's important we establish that.
Right. The 1978 to 82 version of Marion Barry. But what I also recognized with someone like him was he, like all of us, he had his demons, he had his flaws, but he always genuinely put his public service in front of that. And I learned a lot. I learned a lot of the, grassroots organizing. Guys like Joey Aldell, who was one of the first members of the District of Columbia City Council appointed by President Johnson. Mayor Washington was another one. I got to know him. And I think a lot of these folks kind of felt pity for me, because here's this little black kid thinks he's a Republican growing up in Chocolate City, which is all Democrats, right? He was like, okay, baby, let me take you aside and help you understand how you need to rethink this. But they respected my decision. And Marion, for example, was instrumental in helping me with strategies when I ran for the U.S. Senate in 2006. And in fact, a number of his grassroots efforts I employed as a national chairman. And we know how that turned out in 2010.
Yeah.
So I learned well at the knee. But I'd also say, Jack Kemp was a huge influence for me in terms of watching someone within the party make a genuine effort to woo back the black vote and to speak with honesty and integrity about the economic plight of African Americans in this country, and wanting to turn any number of corners on that storyline to create prosperity and wealth. And so I really got to spend a lot of time with him and watching him. So you have these two figures as an example that in many respects are diametrically opposed. But what I found is that they actually do link up. They actually do meet at a certain point. And that's always guided my politics. And it's why, I'm a conservative, and I'm pro life from the womb to the grave. So I'm against the death penalty, and all these things. So for me, there's got to be consistency in my universe, but I also recognize mine is not the only universe. And so if I want to engage with you, if you are, not in the same space with me on abortion or on taxes or on national security, my opportunity and challenge is, how do I make those ends come to a point where they can meet? Our politics today says those ends should never meet, because you are where you are and I am where I am. I'm right, you're wrong, or you're right, I'm wrong. And that doesn't help a pluralistic society deal with troubled times and difficult decisions if everyone thinks they're right or everyone thinks everyone else is wrong.
Well, the notion of compromise and the stories, the anecdotes about Tip O'Neill and Reagan being able to go out for a beer after they just fought all day. Like, those days just seem gone. Like, you're talking about tribalism and toxicity at a level that we've never experienced in this country. But there's also a silver line. I try to find a silver lining in everything. Donald Trump, when he was running for president back in the day, he was like, I'm a uniter. I'm going to make America great, bring everybody together. And I think the real irony, and it's kind of living proof of you and I sitting here today talking, is that he actually did bring people together. But against him. Like, I mean, think about when I think about people like Bill Kristol and you and Nicole Wallace and Rick Wilson, Stuart Steve, like the list can go on and on and on. How those guys, you and Democrats, have merged and become this force that together worked to defeat him, and even more so, defeat Trumpism, which is a whole other conversation. It really is kind of an astonishing thing, because it almost is like this weird metamorphosis of an evolution of that we're in the middle of, and we haven't seen the end yet. But I feel like when it's all said and done, when he's gone from the culture, from the conversation, guys like you, guys like me, we will go back to our thing about, I'm pro this or against that. But I feel like we're learning an incredible lesson that is going to be there for a long time. That's me being an optimist.
No, I actually appreciate your optimism, and I agree with you. And I think what will happen. Okay, so let me do it in stages. I think we're still in stage 1.5 to 2, where there's still some bottom to hit. There's still some more bottom out there. There's still some more difficulties out there. This 2024 election cycle, we can get into the permutations and aspects of which I think are enormously problematic, and that do set up well for Donald Trump to get reelected in next year. But once we get through that period, and however it plays itself out to the universe you're describing, I think you're absolutely right. And what I think we will have learned as we retreat to our traditional, I'm for spending on this, I'm not for spending on that, I'm against this, I'm for that. We will do so, is a term that we in the Catholic Church, refer to when you're talking about very difficult conversations and how you have them. We will do so gently, meaning that we will be mindful of each other's humanity. We will be mindful of the difficulties we just came through. And what's interesting about the point you're making and this opportunity. Ironically and interestingly enough, we did not do that after the Civil War. We never had that moment where we reconciled with ourselves what we'd just been through.
Mm-hmm.
The South refused to give up the ghost on slavery and racism, and it reemerged and remanifested it, reprogrammed it into Jim Crow. Mm-hmm. And all the efforts at reconstruction, rebuilding the country after this horrible 5 years of war and death, was undone. It was systematically undone. It was not allowed to take hold completely. There was still, we didn't stamp out the pockets of resistance as we saw in modern times with Germany on the heels of Nazism, where you're not putting up statues to Himmler in a town in Bavaria or someplace else. Mm-hmm. You're not allowed to do that. No, we're not honoring that. Well, what do? We put those statues up. We hoisted the Confederate flag on state capitol buildings. And so we never reconciled ourselves to that. My hope, along with yours, is that we have that reconciliation after January 6th, that after we get through what remains of Trumpism, that we do not allow it to further metastasize into the bloodstream, into the body politic of this nation, that we excise ourselves of this demon, because it is antithetical to, liberal democracy. And for those out there who want to be political, I'm talking small L, get a grip, right? I mean, because the fact that I even have to say that tells you the moment we're in. And so I agree with your hope there, and I would tack on to it that we actually deal with the remnants of this and not allow it to seed a new generation.
You're 100% right in your assessment. It's so astute in the way you describe it in phases, because you're right. There is another election coming up. And you're also right that there is a plausible path for him to be president again, as insane as that sounds.
I know, right?
I mean, can you actually believe, like, when you saw the people climbing up the Capitol, like, most normal people are like, oh, man, Trump is gone after this, right? Like, even Lindsey Graham, he's like, I'm out, I'm done. Like, they're all just done. And then here we are almost 3 years later, and it's like, he's the front runner, and he's... But because we're not through with those phases yet, and it could get worse before it gets better, it's like a fever. There's a fever. 40 million people, whatever number you want to put on it, are in a cult, right? So they're gone, right? Talk about insanity. Yeah. And Donald Trump is at the root of that fever. So the reconciliation that you're talking about, post-Civil War, and will that happen again, repeat itself, it can go either way. Just like a fever. You can end up in the hospital, and that fever turns into pneumonia, and pneumonia turns into something else, and then all of a sudden, the priest is coming in giving last rites.
That's right.
Or you get amoxicillin, and in 2 days you knock it out, and it's gone. It's our fever that we're collectively experiencing in this country is so tied to him that, I keep listening to Joe Walsh, who's been on this pod, when he says, like, Trump either has to have a heart attack or something. Like, it's
an act of God moment.
How do you break that fever? Because until he's gone, that fever exists.
I agree, and that's the challenge, because, and I think it speaks to where we find ourselves with the candidates running for president right now on the Republican side, trying to soft pedal this. And in the case of DeSantis, mimic it, but only to an extreme measure, where he's out here sounding as dumb and as racist as ever, claiming that my ancestors benefited from slavery. And, I have some choice words about that. But the reality of it is, that's the part of this that we need to cut off. Trump is less the problem in the sense that, this movement he's creating is trying to move a little bit beyond him, right? It's collecting its own energy. And now what you're seeing are some of the other folks out there, the next iterations of Trump, to control Trumpism, trying to emerge, find their lane, create that space. That's the part we need to cut off. I'm less concerned about Trump, because maybe the judicial system takes care of him. Maybe God himself takes care of him. But that's the least of our concerns right now, because what's already in the bloodstream is what you got to deal with. It's like, I recently had an MRI done, and they wanted to do it with contrast. So that meant they injected a dye into my system. And so when they do that, right, it highlights certain things, right? And so two thoughts occurred to me in that moment. It's amazing how, in a medical procedure, I'm like thinking politics. So the first thought that occurred to me was, this dye is a lot like Trumpism. When they put it in and the doctor goes, oh my gosh, I used the wrong contrast, right? Too late. You can't get it out of the system. It's there, right? It's in the bloodstream. How do you get something out of the bloodstream like that, right? And the second thing was, when the doctor said to me after the procedure was over, was, okay, so go home, drink a lot of water to wash this out. That's how they get it out of the system, right? You find the thing. He was like, you drink a lot of water, and that'll help flush the contrast out. And that's the part where we come in. We are now the water. This next iteration of how we see the country becomes the refreshing water to wash this thing out of the bloodstream of our country, so that we can renew ourselves on the other side of this. But it's going to require, I think, a lot of effort. And here's the rub, Andy. I don't know if people want to make the effort. Mm-hmm. They're so pissed, and they're so angry, and there's so much looking for retribution. and they want to own somebody, the libs, the conservative. They don't care. They want to hit something. They want to beat it up. They want to take it out. And our politicians feed that. They grift off of it every day. I mean, I was looking, I got an email this morning from one of the presidential campaigns, was telling me how disappointed they were that they hadn't heard from me. Don't I know they're in the fight against the liberals who are ruining America. And I'm sitting there going, well, wait a minute. I'm doing okay. I'm ruining America. My mom, both my parents, my families, we're healthy. What are you talking about? But they're they're creating these lanes to get me pissed off and angry at something, right? And I'm like, why? Why am I doing this? Why are we in this space? And so it becomes much harder work than I think we may realize.
Well, it's funny because this sort of leads to my next question. I thought you were going to say that when the doctors put the contrast in, they looked at the results and they're like, my God, Mr. Steele, you're a Democrat. What?
I get that a lot.
Right. So, but to stick with that analogy for a second, my next question on here is like, ask Michael, what the hell happened to his party? Okay, so what you're talking about is your party, the leadership of your party is not putting water in. They're putting more bad contrast in.
That's right.
So they're making it worse, which is literally what you just said. All of that shit.
Yep.
How could someone email you that?
Right.
We got the 325-pound gorilla in the room, got more charges hit against him last night. Twice impeached, this. I mean, it's unbelievable what we're seeing with our own eyes and ears. And yet, someone who's running for president against that guy is emailing you saying, what the hell's wrong with liberals? They're destroying the country.
Right.
I mean,
exactly.
I'm kind of speechless. Like, how does that even, how is that still happening?
It's like, wait a minute, hold on, let me get this straight. You mean Joe Biden was president on January 6th? Is that what you're telling me? Because last time I checked, it was Donald Trump. It was the Republicans. And every last one of you SOBs got to the House and Senate floor and condemned him until he made a phone call and Kevin went running to bend the knee.
Or
McConnell went
else.
radio silent.
Right.
Right. You know, and so you're absolutely right. I have said for a long time now, for most of the former president's term, and certainly since then, we are where we are right now inside my party because the leadership capitulated everything. They took all the chips and they put it in front of Donald Trump and said, they're yours.
But
you
why?
play them however you see them.
He is the last person on earth. They should throw away their legacies, their reputation, their party, our democracy, our constitution. The last person who would not give them one shred of loyalty in return. Why do they do it and still do it despite everything we know?
Because they make a lot of money off of it. And they now control mechanisms of power in states, unlike they've had in a long time. They've got a base that basically the tail wagging the dog, where the base is driving the direction of the party. And they're afraid of that. It's not so much that they're afraid of Donald Trump. Yeah, they don't like the name calling and the haranguing, but they don't like it when he sicks his base on them, when he says to them, well, I'm sorry, Ron DeSantis is a good example. Ron DeSantis, the reason he's mealy-mouthed about Trump, because he knows he only became governor. He only got the nomination because Donald Trump endorsed him. He was flailing in that primary. He wasn't driving that primary. And Donald Trump came in, endorsed him. He cuts the ad in the general talk about reading, build the wall stories to his kids. Playing up the MAGA card and kissing Donald Trump's left and right butt cheek at every turn. Now he thinks he's going to go run up against the king. And Donald Trump has said, okay, I'm ready whenever you want to engage, let's go. And I'm still waiting. And Donald Trump's still waiting. He won't. And the reason he won't is because he knows that base will turn on him. And this is what I keep saying to people. This thing is over. This race is over. And if by some weird miracle that someone else winds up with the Republican nomination, do you really think his base is going to forgive that individual for helping to set Donald Trump up, for helping to promote, and this is how they'll look at it, the deep state against Donald Trump? They didn't rally behind Trump against Joe Biden's Justice Department, even though all of this began with Donald Trump's Justice Department.
Explain his path. What is his path to the White House again? In the doomsday, pessimistic scenario. Trump. Yeah. How does he?
3 states. 3 states. Remember, Donald Trump didn't lose the election by 8 million votes. He lost the election by 78,000 votes over 3 states: Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. They've already they've done the math. They're calculating how they're going to. Remember, the man turned out almost 8 to 10 million more voters than he got the last time in 2016.
Right.
So what do you think what do you think the plan is to overwhelm the 78,000 votes in those 3 states? This is the broader point, which I don't think Democrats appreciate. The media, especially the press part of it, appreciates, is that there are voters out there who are silently clapping, applauding, supporting Donald Trump, and you'll never know it because they've learned. I'm not sticking my head up so you to hit it.
Right.
I'm not identifying myself in your polls so you can make fun of me and try to discount my vote. I'm just going to show up when it's time to vote. And they will. And so I think you need to be, not you personally, but I think folks need to be mindful that there are a lot more Americans who like what Donald Trump is selling than not, who buy into the grievance, who buy into they're coming for us, whether it's migrants being bussed into their community, whether it's Black people who are now asserting their history, whether it is our women, who are, staking their claim, and we won't even start the conversation around gay, lesbian, transgender community. So yeah, all those others out there, I need someone to deal with them. And Trump's the guy to do that. And that's his motto. That's, what does he say? He launches his presidential campaign talking about, I'm your retribution.
Right.
Right? I stand in the way of them coming after you. I'm going to sacrifice my political body for your well-being. And they're like, thank you. You're the first person to ever do that. That's how the loyalty locks in. Now, is he loyal to them? Hell no. He doesn't care. He didn't give a rat's ass about any of his supporters, any of them. Because the moment they say something or just a little bit off of that, Donald Trump is my everything, he kicks them to the curb. And we've just seen that in so many instances. So that's how this becomes a bigger problem. So what has to be done is a higher level of organization, a higher level of information infiltration. In other words, pushing out the information, not just about what Trump is representing, the fact that he's now loaded up to the gills in indictments and likely will be in the middle of trials that could see his ultimate conviction. But that the party that's promoting and pushing him have offered you nothing in return. You may not like Bidenomics, but guess what? Inflation is down. Interest rates are down. Well, interest rates are coming down. Even though the Fed's still trying to play with it, they're trying to get it right. But you're not looking at inflationary rates. Gas prices are stabilizing. They go up a little bit, they come down. They go up, they go. That's the way the game was playing itself out. The infrastructure of the country is getting rebuilt. Yeah, there's a lot there. So where in this are you hurting? Where because if Trump and the Republicans was, and I'm saying this as a Republican, I was pissed as hell during those 4 years. Every week was infrastructure week. What do you mean? Tell me we can't come up with an infrastructure bill? We can't come up with a health care bill? We had 14 doctors in the House when I was RNC chairman. And I would have these meetings, and I'm like, okay, I'm ready to go out against Obamacare, right? Even though I know it's the heritage plan from 1994 and 1995. Okay, we will, I get that, right? And we can make that case, but let's make the case. What is it? What do you want? Well, what are we selling? What are we telling the American people we're going to replace it with? Okay, you guys still thinking on that. So that's the wake up narrative for a lot of Americans. Like, okay, I get you want somebody to go beat the hell out of somebody you don't like, but when that's done and you feel satisfied, what do you think you're going to get in return? Because how does that help your kid get a job?
Well, that's the thing.
How does that help your business grow?
They vote against their own self-interests.
Their own self-interest.
Do you agree with people like Stuart Stevens and me who believe that all of this Trumpism, at the root of it, is just pretty much nothing but racism? Because that's what keeps people from thinking about the kid that needs college tuition and health care and all that, because it just distracts them away from all the shit that the party has not delivered.
Yeah, no, I do. I've always been throughout my life very careful about throwing around racism, the word racism, and making those types of allegations. But I can't help at this point but conclude at the core of all of this, and I've said this for most of my adult life, the problem of racism in America will be an ongoing problem until Black folk and white folk decide to deal with it and to deal honestly with it. Because this is not about any other ethnic group. All the other ethnic groups have benefited off of the gains that Black folks have been able to carve out of this country, right? The civil rights gains, the voting rights gains, et cetera. But the thread that ties all that together is a 1619 problem, right? And it has been a problem since that time. And that we don't want to deal, to put it bluntly, white folks don't want to deal with it. And why do I say that? Because they're now buying into this nonsense when they're trying to tell me that actually my family gained skills that they otherwise wouldn't have had if they hadn't been enslaved. That slavery was nothing more but a glorified jobs program.
You mean you don't have in your Twitter profile hobbies, blacksmithing?
Right. I gotta do that. But that speaks to it. When you're trying to whitewash the stain, instead of acknowledging that it's there and figuring out how together we clean it up, we fix it, right? That tells me you ain't ready. And you think in the process of trying to address that, to your very point, that you're losing something. Well, why are you blaming my kids for race slavery? I'm not. I just want your kids to understand what it was and the impact it had on my family and the impact it had on their family, right? And that's okay. It's okay to say, oh yeah, my great-great-granddaddy owned a slave. And it's okay to acknowledge, yeah, my great-great-granddaddy was the slave owned by your great-great-granddaddy, all right? And so let's have that conversation. That's okay. But when you got someone saying, well, I don't want to acknowledge that, and I don't want you to guilt my kid, and I don't want to learn that. I want to rewrite that story. I don't want to highlight that side. We just need to talk about the benefits from slavery. Okay, well, you want to talk about the benefits? All right, let's talk about how we built the country. How the wealth that your family has came from my family's labor. Let's have that you want to have that conversation? All right, then that leads me to reparations. Mm-hmm. My point, you don't get away from it. You just don't get away from it.
Well, it's like slaves built the pyramids, right? They're not putting that in their Twitter profiles either, like your pyramid building. In In our final couple of minutes, I got to ask you about 24.
Yep.
Would you say, speaking of insanity, that I am insane if I believe that Mike Pence is going to end up with the nomination?
No. I don't think you're insane. I just think you're brain dead. That's all. No, you're not insane. I think you're brain dead. You're gonna have to explain to me how someone everybody wants to hang turns around and winds up with the nomination. But I'm ready to listen.
All right, I'm going to defend the brain dead community right now, politically brain dead community. And if I was in Vegas, I'd have to demand like some serious odds before I actually put my money on it. But here's my thinking. Trump, as we know, is just getting more and more mired in legal muck and cannot run a campaign. It's just not. I mean, we've all at some point in our lives been involved in a lawsuit. One lawsuit takes up a lot of time, a lot of thinking, a lot of resources, a lot of time, money, whatever. More stuff is coming out. At some point, he's either going to cut a deal, and that deal might be, I got to admit guilt, and I got to withdraw from the race. Or he's just going to, like Christie, it's a little bit, but Christie is inching up in the polls. There's a lot of time between now and the election. That something happens, because that's the thing we know about Trump. Trump has literally destroyed conventional wisdom. It does not exist in the last 8 years, which is foundational to my brain dead theory. And so sticking with conventional wisdom being out the window, there is a chance things could happen in the next several months that just weaken his candidacy. And the guy waiting is the guy who was vice president, the guy who was in Congress, the guy who knows how to talk to the media because he was a talk show host, the guy who is literally Jesus, like he is the real deal, not, Mr. 2 Corinthians, that just like
walked into a bar.
Yeah. 2 Corinthians.
I always loved that one.
Yeah. Well, Trump, the fact that, by the way, just a sidetrack for a second, the fact that Trump has the balls to stand in front of people and talk about the Bible either means he's delusional, a sociopath, or has confidence that men like you and I, people like you and I, we can only dream of having. So at the end of the day, conservatives, the Michael Steeles, the Rick Wilsons, the Stuart Stevens, all the Republicans who left to support Joe Biden, if they're looking at Mike Pence on the ticket, they're going back, right? So maybe there's just something's going to happen between now and then that just makes him get in there in the right moment, the right time.
Am
I still brain dead?
There's
am I still brain dead?
I saw the paddles. Trying to resuscitate. So I get it. Not completely. There was a blip on the screen. So there's possibility. But here's where I think logically you're right. That the Republican MAGA base is not going to warm up to the guy they want to hang. And they drive the primary right now. If Pence, as I've said this, I've actually said this to Chris Christie and a few others, if they're able to pull that remaining 65% of the base that no one talks about, because everyone only focuses on the 35% that's rabid in the corner screaming at itself, then you're right. The mainstream traditional Republicans would, because they do kind of fall into he was the vice president. He's arguably the next in line. They kind of fall back into that sort of traditional thinking of primary process. I could see him sort of gathering some energy off of those votes. But the problem is I haven't seen him kind of parlay that conversation yet. And the window is closing. Keep in mind, he's not on the first debate stage yet.
Right.
He can't get to 40,000 individual donors yet. That tells me a lot. So he's got to figure out, maybe he should have done like some of the others and paid voters $20 gift cards to to send him $1. But if he's able to turn that corner, then I think there's a lot more. If he gets on that first debate stage, I think he's able to turn that corner. I think he's going to be competitive in Iowa. Trump is not going to be competitive in Iowa. I think Trump loses Iowa, just like he did in 2016. But don't get me started on Iowa. It's a reason why the Democrats took it off the top. They should have. I tried when I was RNC chairman and got my clock clean for even suggesting that we not do that. But New Hampshire, South Carolina especially, opens a world of window of opportunity for someone like Mike Pence, particularly if he places a good second in Iowa to someone else, or even wins it outright, which he arguably could. He's spending a lot of time there, spent good resources there. He is their Jesus for those Christian nationalists and those right-wing Christian conservatives. And so they may rally around him because the Bible teaches they shouldn't want to hang anybody. So they may have forgiven him enough to vote for him.
Well, it's certainly going to be interesting to see how this unfolds.
That's if they follow the Bible. So let's just
that's probably their first favorite book, and then Art of the Deal is the second favorite book, like Trump said. Right. This has been great. I have so many more questions I could ask you for another couple hours, which means you'll have to come back. This was a lot of fun.
Look, man, I'd love to come back. Absolutely.
We'll talk again next time.
You got it, my friend. You take care of yourself. Good to be with you.
You too. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening. This episode of The Back Room was edited and produced by me, Andy Ostroy, and it was co-produced and co-edited by Matty Rosenberg, and co-produced by Jen Hammoud. We'd appreciate it if you could take a moment to rate and review, and also follow or subscribe. Until next time, keep your eyes on Washington, Hollywood, and your own backyards. Have a great week.